All right, so we're looking at functions today. Think about the menu program we had. We had the if statement inside there, then we had all the code that we need to run for that if statement. The code we're working on now, there's only a couple lines of code. But think about if you had a big program, you might have 500 lines of code running in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a function. A function you're going to send data to, have it execute, and then send something back. Or just call the function and have something run in there. There are many ways to load different functions. We're just going to start by putting the functions right in the same py file that we're going to have our main code. So if you look at function 1, we have a definition here, which is our function. So the first line of code that gets run is get num equals input, enter a number, and then line 6 runs. And when the line 6 run, it calls get num, and then it goes up and executes number 2 and number 3. Now notice I have square here, and I have the value going up there. That value is being transferred to the square function under here, which then we can run inside that function. So if we run that, you can see I enter a number, I do 5, and the number squared is 25. So this line of code runs, it asks to enter a number. I then call the square function, send it the number 5, which is what I entered. It then prints that command and then comes back down and continues after that. If we look at function 2, you can see I can start making this square function a whole lot more complex. And again, we're putting the code somewhere else, spending the time to get it right, and now we can just go square and have some cool numbers. So if we run this one, I can enter a number here, and if I enter 5 again, it's going to run. Now, all I'm doing is checking and saying, is it a number? And if I run it again, and this time I enter a letter, it's going to say, oh, I can't square a letter. And if I hadn't had that, if I ran it originally, it was just going to blow up. So if we look at number 3, we can do the same thing. If I enter a number, it says, oh, I can't square that. But now I can do floating points as well. So now I can do floating points as well as integers. So again, my function, I spend time fixing the function, and then we can just reuse that over and over. If I look at number 4, I can start saying, okay, if I enter a letter, it goes, oh, not a number. It doesn't blow up, but it doesn't keep asking for a number. It just says, oh, it's not a number. And it comes back with none. And the reason it comes back with none is because there's nothing returned. So we didn't return a value. So we get none, which doesn't look particularly pleasant. So let's look at number 5. If we run number 5, again, we're just looking for, if it's a digit, we enter a 5, and everybody's happy because we're getting an integer. If we run here and we do 5.5, it goes, oh, it doesn't enter an integer. We are still running the function, but it's asking for us to validate that. So if we enter a letter, it says, oh, that's still not an integer. So if we now enter an integer and we press enter, we return from the function and get back and print it out. So we can have I/O, while loops all going on inside the function. We can put all the code we want in the function. There's no limit to what we can run in our function. If we look at function 6, we can run this. We can do the same thing with real numbers. So we have get integer, and now we have get real. So if we run a letter, it's not a real number. Integers are real numbers. It's just now converted to a real number. So get real will change whatever it's sent to it to a real number. Can we work with lists? Sure, we can work with lists. So as you can see, I have a list I call the list, sending the list to the function, and then once I have the list, I can return the length of the list. I mean, length is itself its own function, but I'm just trying to show something that would work here. If we look at function 8, you can see that if I don't send anything, it would normally blow up. If you do length of a list that doesn't have anything in it, it blows up. But now I put something in it, a none, so now we have a length in there. That's error checking. If we go and look at a couple lists, you can see that we get an error type here. This is the same issue we were having. I'm sending an integer and asking for the length of an integer. And you can't ask for a length of an integer. So we do some error checking, and now in function 10, it checks the data type. And we can check the type as my list, and if it's a list, we do the length. If it's a string, we do the length. Other than that, we return a value of -1. -1 is often what would be returned from a function if the function was unable to function for some reason, but it doesn't want to throw an error. So instead of returning a length, it would return -1. And so you say if the length return is equal to 0, there was some error with the data we sent. And so that's how you can use functions in your code.